After being reborn, I broke off my engagement with the regiment commander and married a rough man from the campaign kitchen crew. All because in my previous life I had foolishly given up the chance to enlist in the army for Damian Lu, only for him to hand over my spot to the girl of his dreams, Celestine. While I stayed home managing the household, he and Celestine lived their sweet romance. He grew increasingly impatient with me, sending letter after letter demanding a divorce. Later, Damian was injured and discharged from the army. I never left his side. I helped him recover. I carried him through his darkest days. But once he rebuilt his career, he still could not forget Celestine. Even my own son, the child I carried for 10 months and raised with all my love, looked down on me, thinking I was unworthy of his elegant, wealthy father. He forced me to leave with nothing. This time, I will help Damian chase that so-called true love he desires, while I build my own future and push my rough husband to enter the military academy and rise to the rank of commander. Chapter 1. Director, I've decided to give up my enlistment and stay at the community textile factory as a worker. The director looked at me in surprise. Girl from the Lee family, are you sure? This is the last spot to enlist. It's even in the same unit as your fiancé. Wouldn't it be wonderful to serve together as a couple? My eyes fell on the bright red slogans painted on the wall outside the window. One person enlists, and the whole family is proud. Defending the nation leaves no regrets. Dedicate your youth to the Green Barracks. Once again, I confirmed it. I had truly returned to the autumn recruitment season of 1975. I smiled faintly and replied with firm conviction. Director, nowadays women also hold up half the sky. The textile industry is an essential pillar of our national economy. I'm young, and I will not lose myself for fleeting love. I want to devote myself to the cause of socialist construction. In my past life, everything revolved around Damian. But in the end, I lost it all and died full of regret. This time, I will never marry Damian again. The director, visibly moved by my resolute declaration, patted me warmly on the shoulder. Well said. The torch of our era now lies in the hands of your generation. With this spirit, I am certain you will be a role model for all workers. After thanking her, I walked out of the community office. Down the narrow alley, I saw people in blue work uniforms riding classic 28-inch bicycles. At that moment, the reality of my rebirth hit me hard. I couldn't help but look up at the setting sun and burst into laughter. It felt so good. Everything could still change. In this life, I will live for myself and make it worth living. Chapter 2. As soon as I stepped into the house, the aroma of stewed chicken drifted through the air and stirred my soul. Guided by the memories of my past life, I lifted my eyes. Beneath the dim light of the living room, I once again saw Damian, 40 years younger, sitting on the sofa. Just as I remembered him, young Damian had deep eyes, sharp features, and a stern air. A single glance from him was enough to make my heart tremble and my cheeks flush. But a man like him never truly loved me. He was the youngest commander in the Southern Military District with a brilliant future ahead of him. And I was just an ordinary textile factory worker. If it hadn't been for the fact that my grandfather once saved the elder Lu, we never would have had a marriage contract. Seeing my silence, Damian frowned elegantly and handed me a sheet of paper. Jenny, I retrieved the marriage report we submitted last time. I requested it back from the political commissar. He seemed to want to say more, but was cut off by his mother, Madame Lu, who looked at him with disapproval and coldly said, "It's best to postpone this marriage between you two. Damian is at a critical point in his career. Young people shouldn't be distracted by love. They must devote their energy to strengthening the nation's defense and safeguarding its security." My father frowned and tried to argue. What the lady says isn't entirely wrong, but our Jenny is also preparing to enlist. Wouldn't it be ideal for the two of them to be together in the army after marriage? My father's eyes were full of worry as he defended me. Do you think the army is a place for enjoying life? If she goes, she will only distract Damian. Does your family want Jenny to become an obstacle in Damian's path? You can't possibly expect Damian to carry Jenny for the rest of his life just because of an old debt of gratitude to the Lee family, can you? Madame Lu's gaze toward me was as if I were a filthy rag. The Lu family had a long military tradition and a solid status. It was natural that his parents never considered me worthy. From the very beginning, they had shown dissatisfaction with this engagement. But for the sake of propriety, they couldn't break it unilaterally, so they kept delaying. That marriage report now in Damian's hand had only been submitted because the elder Lu forced him to. As for my family, my parents always kept Damian's preferences in mind, acting in everything to please him, afraid of offending him in the slightest way. Every gesture, every word, was an attempt to curry favor. Such an unequal marriage, it was better not to have it all. Damian shot me a sidelong glance when I kept silent, and just as he was about to say something else, I answered calmly, I think Madame Lu is right. Marriage is a serious matter. There's no need to rush. Damian had not expected that response. His eyes flickered with a mix of confusion and astonishment, his lips parted slightly, but no words came out, while his brow furrowed involuntarily. Chapter 3. In my previous life, when Damian retrieved that marriage report and placed it before me, I had tearfully begged him in desperation. Only then did he reluctantly agree, saying that if I stayed at home managing the household and caring for his parents, he might be able to persuade them. I agreed, willingly giving up my dream of enlisting. But he handed that final enlistment slot to his goddess, Celestine. After the wedding, Damian's unit was transferred to the south. He didn't allow me to follow him and left me behind in the north. I never once complained. I filled the house with joy as I handled every chore. Yet to Damian, my diligence was vulgar and my warmth was clumsy. He had eyes only for Celestine, the darling of the military arts troupe. Each day, he grew more contemptuous of me, writing letter after letter demanding a divorce. Later, during a military exercise, Damian was gravely injured while saving Celestine after she stepped on a landmine. His legs were ruined and his future left in shambles. Proud as he was, Damian refused to become a burden on the country. He rejected an administrative post and retired to civilian life. Celestine, however, quickly accepted the proposal of the commander's son. Faced with this cruel twist of fate, Damian fell into deep depression. I, without resentment, stayed by his side. I even taught myself acupuncture just to help heal him. By the late 1980s, thanks to economic reforms, Damian entered the business world and found great success. I thought my patience had finally paid off. But one day, while I was alone in the hospital caring for my ailing mother-in-law, I saw him tenderly accompanying Celestine to a prenatal checkup. In his eyes, I saw a gentleness he had never once shown me. That was the moment I realized Damian had never forgotten his youthful love. He didn't remember my years of sacrifice. He didn't remember how I nursed him tirelessly when he was broken. Everything I had done was nothing but a bothersome burden to him. His heart was wrapped in ice that not even all my love could melt. With his daily contempt, I eventually became a madwoman everyone avoided. Even my son, the child I bore for 10 months and raised with all my effort, ended up ashamed of me. Mom, you should look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're really worthy of Dad. Aunt Celestine and Dad are a perfect couple. You only clung to a debt of gratitude to hold onto the title of Madame Lu all these years, keeping them apart. You were never truly his partner. He didn't even invite me to his wedding. Instead, he honored Celestine as father's lifelong mistress in the place of a mother. My own son's betrayal was the final dagger that shattered me completely. I had given him everything, shielded him from every harm. And yet his selfish cruelty cut my heart into pieces. I hated him. I could not accept it. Because of Damian, I had wasted my entire life. This time, I will stay far away from him. This time, I will live for myself. Chapter 4. Damian ignored all formalities and dragged me straight into my room. Closing the door, he forced himself to explain. Jenny, my family just thinks we're still young, that there's no need to rush into marriage. Lately, the Southern Military District has been overwhelming with work. Once I have more time, I'll resubmit the marriage application. Besides, if we marry and serve in the same unit, it might not be appropriate. You should think more carefully about enlisting. I smiled serenely. There's nothing more to think about. Damian, the truth is I never intended to enlist just to become your comrade in arms. My words stunned him for a moment. He couldn't believe I would so easily give up such a valuable opportunity. He sneered. Since when did you learn to play the trick of pulling away to draw me in, Jenny? I met his gaze calmly. All I think is that enlisting in the army is a serious matter. The troops are not a place for romantic entanglements. His words sounded noble, but his actions proved otherwise. In my previous life, he forced me to yield under the pressure of our engagement, and he gifted my enlistment slot to Celestine. And now, once again, everything coming from his mouth was nothing but excuses to block me from joining the army. Wasn't it all just because he wanted to save that slot for his goddess? I was about to tell Damian I wanted to break off the engagement when someone pounded on the door. Madame Lu's voice came from the other side. Damian, it's late. We should go. Didn't you say you would help Celestine with her radio today? Without finishing our conversation, Damian only had time to tell me he'd come back later to continue, then left without a backward glance. I watched his figure disappear in haste. I knew he wouldn't return tonight. My parents had slaughtered the hen they had been saving for New Year just to welcome him properly. My father had risen early, sweeping the courtyard several times until the stone tiles gleamed with clear water. My mother, spinning like a top, cleaned the square wooden table again and again before laying out the floral tablecloth she rarely used. The windows were polished with newspaper until they shone, and the portrait of the leader on the wall was carefully dusted. And yet none of this was enough to make Damian stay for dinner. As long as Celestine was around, he would always forget me completely. Celestine had been Damian's classmate in middle school, beautiful, talented, able to sing and dance. She was, and always had been, the goddess of Damian's heart. Because of certain debts carried over from the past, Damian had never been able to fulfill his dream of enlisting. Recently, his family situation was finally resolved, but by then the last enlistment slot in our district had already been assigned to me. For Celestine, Damian was willing to go to hell and back and much more, if it simply meant pressuring his fiancée, who had neither name nor status, to give up her place. In my previous life, Damian had even agreed to marry me legally just to secure that enlistment slot, and that was the start of my wasted years. This time, that slot will return to Celestine. Because this time, I want to sever every tie with Damian. I am eager to see if my resignation will truly allow them to be together forever. Chapter 5. The words I wanted to say lodged in my throat. Fortunately, there were only 5 days left of Damian's visitation leave. Celestine would soon enlist as a soldier in the performing arts troupe, and the entire unit would be transferred south. After that, with heaven and earth between us, there would be nothing left to bind us. After dinner, I couldn't bear to stay home under my parents' furrowed brows, so I went out alone, walking by the quiet river to ease the tension of this new life. Without realizing it, I wandered close to the camp where Damian's unit was stationed. I couldn't help recalling those days in my previous life when my heart had been filled with nothing but him. The camp wasn't far from home, but whether because of his devotion to serving the country or simply to avoid me, Damian rarely returned. Ever since his enlistment, he seldom came back of his own accord. Each time he'd leave, I would prepare in advance, putting on my best clothes, carefully braiding my hair into 2 shiny black plaits. In my backpack, I always carried sunflower seeds I had roasted myself and cakes I had baked with love. Each time I caught sight of his figure, the one I had missed so much, my heart raced with nervous excitement, blind to the disdain in his eyes. Thinking back now, the memory fills me with sorrow. As I lifted my gaze, I suddenly saw Damian in the distance, walking beside a woman. She had a slender figure, a floral dress that clung to her curves, and long black hair cascading over her shoulders. Their hands were intertwined, and when their eyes met, they were full of tenderness. It was her Celestine, the woman who had intruded on my marriage in my past life and tormented me for half a lifetime. What a perfect chance. Containing my emotions, I strode forward and planted myself in front of Damian and Celestine. So, this is where you're fixing the radio? By the river? Damian's face instantly went pale. He dropped Celestine's hand as though it had burned him. Frowning slightly, he looked at me. Jenny? Didn't I tell you to wait at home? What are you doing here? Were you following me? I let out a cold laugh. What? Is this road your family's private property? If I hadn't happened to pass by, I never would have understood why you suddenly wanted to cancel the marriage report. Damian faltered, his eyes shifting away. Jenny, you're misunderstanding. The wedding was postponed because of us. This has nothing to do with Celestine. At that moment, Celestine clung gently to his arm, her expression dripping with innocence and her voice sweet as honey. Damian, don't argue with Jenny because of me. I don't want to see you upset. My laugh came sharp and bitter. What an act. Don't you know he already has a fiancée? And you still come here pretending to be pure and innocent? Have you no shame? Celestine's eyes welled with tears instantly. She looked up at Damian, her voice trembling with hurt. She's misunderstanding, isn't she? I only see you as a good friend. That was exactly how it had been in my past life, this endless game of half confession, half denial, sowing discord between us time and again. Damian immediately shielded her, pulling her behind him and glaring at me with reproach. Jenny, watch your words. There is nothing improper between Hong Ing and me. I widened my eyes and raised my voice. Nothing improper? And holding hands is pure and innocent, is it? Do you take me for a 3-year-old who believes anything? I am your fiancé. Is this how you repay all the years I've stood by you? I had always been submissive with Damian. This sudden defiance left him completely stunned, unsure how to respond. A few women nearby, who had clearly been eavesdropping, exchanged knowing looks and began whispering. Their animated gestures and curious stares said enough. Within a day or two, this would become the juiciest gossip in the neighborhood. Perhaps fearing she would be branded as the mistress interfering in a military engagement, Celestine quickly leaned into Damian and murmured softly, "It's just that we were always close in school. I've always relied on him. It was my fault you misunderstood us." I snorted. A misunderstanding? Even a blind man could see the so-called spiritual connection between you two. If you were honest, I might respect this so-called true love. But this? What do you call it wanting to be the mistress and still wear the halo of a saint? Celestine burst into tears. Jenny, nothing happened between Damian and me. How can you say that about me? In front of Damian, she was always a delicate white flower. But in private, she had often attacked me with venomous words. What could a peasant girl like you possibly have that would attract Damian? Chasing soldiers all the way to camp just to cling to him, what shame. You're only holding on to him because of an old debt. People as poor as you shouldn't even exist. In the past, I had been too weak to defend myself. But this time, no more. As expected, Damian exploded with rage. Jenny, watch your mouth. I withdrew the marriage report because there have been changes in the regiment lately, and I need to reconsider the timing of our wedding. Don't put the blame on Celestine, not as filthy as you think. You're crossing the line. I want you to apologize to her right now. Celestine wiped her tears, but in her eyes shone a spark of triumph. In my past life, every time I argued with her, Damian forced me to apologize. Even when I sobbed and told him she had started it, he never believed me. He never thought someone as gentle and elegant as Celestine could say such cruel things. And as always, she now stopped him with false tenderness. Damian, it was my fault. Don't speak to Jenny like that. I stepped forward, pointing straight at her. Shut up. Stop pretending to be the martyr. You're disgusting. You destroy other people's relationships and still act like the victim. You make me sick. Never before had I defied Damian like this. He roared. Jenny, if you won't apologize, then get out of my sight. I will never marry such a vulgar woman. I smiled with disdain. Don't worry, Damian. You'll never have to see me again. His face froze, alarm flashing in his eyes. What do you mean by that? Chapter 6. It means exactly what you heard, I said coldly. Our engagement was arranged by our parents when we were children. Since we were never legally married, the engagement is cancelled. I won't keep lying to myself. You owe me nothing, and you don't need to marry me just to repay your grandfather's favor. Stay with Celestine. I'm leaving. I'll set you both free to be together. From this day forward, we are no longer tied to one another. You go your way and I'll go mine. With that, I turned and walked away without a backward glance. In my previous life, I had watched Damian's back countless times. This time, it was my turn to leave first. 2 nights later, half asleep, I heard someone tapping on my window from outside. I already knew who it was. It wasn't the first time. To avoid waking the neighbors and sparking gossip, I opened the window and let Damian climb in. His gaze, deep as a bottomless well, locked on me, carrying 1,000 unspoken words. That look again. It was that same expression, warm, nostalgic, almost passionate, that had made me fall for him over and over in my past life. I pinched my thighs secretly to stay clear-headed and asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Damian gripped my wrist tightly, leaned closer, and asked in a low voice, "Is it true you gave up your enlistment?" I heard it from the community director. I nodded. "I'm no longer interested. I don't want to be a burden on the military organization." I thought he would be pleased. After all, he had been waiting for me to hand the slot to Celestine. But his face darkened instantly. "What does this mean, Jenny? First you give up enlistment, and now you cancel the engagement? This isn't a game." I mocked him with a twisted smile. "Isn't this exactly what you wanted? I hand over the enlistment to Celestine and give her the title of Madame Lu. Then you two can be together in the unit, the perfect couple of the army. Isn't that right?" Damian hadn't expected me to say it so bluntly. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. "You're talking nonsense. I already promised my grandfather that once things calm down in the regiment, I'll marry you. Before the relocation south, I want you to get pregnant. The title of Madame Lu will always be yours. You don't need to do these things just to catch my attention." Outside, the gossips are already running their mouths, and Celestine has been suffering from the rumors. I don't want her to be affected any further. I lowered my head, hiding the tears welling in my eyes, forcing a bitter smile. Inside, I was torn apart, yet a corner of my heart still ached faintly. So this was why he came, not for love, not for guilt, but only to protect Celestine's reputation. "Damian, you don't love me. Why insist on marrying me?" At last, I voiced aloud the question I had always swallowed in my past life. He fell silent, discomfort flickering across his face. Then he frowned with irritation. "What love? Our engagement was arranged years ago. It was our parents' decision, not mine." I stood in silence for a moment before speaking calmly. "Chasing after your love has been exhausting. I don't want to live like this anymore. For so many years, I assumed we would be together. But now I see it was only my own delusion." Damian said nothing, pressing his lips into a thin line. I took a deep breath. "Go. Don't ever come back to me. May we both find our own peace." For a moment, the air turned heavy. Then I heard Damian let out a scornful laugh. "Fine. So be it. Just don't regret the words you spoke today." He leapt back out the window and slammed it shut. His departure didn't stir the slightest emotion in me. I turned off the lamp and lay down to sleep. If not for that engagement, he and I, a simple factory girl and a military prodigy, would never have crossed paths. I won't delude myself into thinking he can't live without me. If he ever felt anything, it was nothing more than fleeting physical reaction. In all my past life, I had never entered his heart. And in this one, I never will. From now on, as long as I stop chasing him, we will be two parallel lines that never meet. This time, I will seize my second chance to earn money. The great era of reform and opening is coming, and I will not waste it on foolish love. I will fight for myself. Chapter 7. After Damian's visitation leave ended, he returned to his unit. As for me, I began each day before dawn, working tirelessly at the factory, moving among the massive textile machines and monitoring their operation with care. I did not allow myself even the smallest negligence. In every break, I sought out the most experienced masters, eager to learn from them. The neighbors and my co-workers whispered behind my back, "Has the Lee family's daughter gone mad? Instead of becoming an officer's wife, she chooses to work as a textile laborer? Her family must be furious. Even if she's a good worker, how could that compare to being the wife of a commander?" They hadn't been reborn. Of course, they couldn't see the future. They didn't know that after 1984, the state would begin reducing compulsory plan production, and by the late 1980s, China would become the world's largest textile producer. The non-state economy would begin to flourish. For now, people still dress simply, with limited materials, styles, and colors. But soon, the textile industry would not only meet basic needs, but also the growing demand for customization, fashion, and function. My goal was to stay in the factory for a few years, master the techniques, and then ride the wave of the nation's most vibrant development. With the advantage of being reborn, I believed firmly that I could start a business and achieve my dreams. Chapter 8. That morning, on my way to work, I was walking by the city moat when sudden grunts broke the calm. Looking around, I discovered a huge black pig had escaped from an army truck transporting supplies. It bolted in panic straight toward me. Startled, I turned and ran. The pig charged after me, and behind it came a young soldier who had leapt from the truck. I was running, the pig was chasing me, and the soldier was chasing the pig. What a ridiculous sight! The chase continued along the river until I slipped and fell with a loud plop into the water. The icy river seeped through me instantly, soaking my clothes to the bone. Struggling to stay afloat, I felt a mix of despair and sorrow. What good was rebirth if I was going to die because of a pig? My eyes, nose, and mouth filled with the filthy water. There in the murky current, my tears only disappeared into the river. Is this what fate has in store for me? My hands reached out for help, but all they found were slippery weeds. At that moment, the soldier chasing the pig saw me fall. Without hesitation, he dove into the water. In just a few strokes he reached me, wrapped a strong arm around me, and hauled me back to shore. Soaked through, my wet clothes clung to my body, outlining my curves. He hurriedly stripped off his own wet military jacket, wrung it out, and offered it to me without daring to look. Scratching his head awkwardly, he muttered, "Comrade, I'm really sorry. That pig is so unruly. I didn't think it would scare you like this." But I froze as I looked at his face. A wave of emotions surged through me. More than 40 years ago, in another life, I had crossed paths with him too. It was after Damian and I had married, when his disdain for me grew day by day until he finally sent me divorce papers. Desperate, I had packed my meager belongings, boarded 3 trains, and traveled over 2,000 kilometers across 3 days and nights to reach his camp in the south. Damian refused to see me. He only sent someone with a note. "This isn't working. We think differently. It's best to part ways. Each of us should find our own peace." Unable to see him, starving and alone, I collapsed beside a field near the barracks. And it was this very soldier, with his honest, sincere face, who found me. He gave me 2 steamed buns, and even helped me find a hostel that didn't require papers. Later, I learned he was a cook in Damian's unit. His name was Lucas. He was diligent and hardworking, though from a humble family. He had only studied through middle school before enlisting. In 2 lives, I crossed paths with him twice. If that wasn't fate, then what was it? Perhaps heaven was putting him on my path again. For the first time, I felt an inexplicable connection to Lucas. Biting my lips, still trembling from the cold, I teased, "You really take good care of your pigs, don't you? You won't get off so easily for this." Lucas scratched his head, even more embarrassed. "It was my fault. I swear I'll punish that pig. Comrade, I'm sorry for causing you trouble. And how do you want me to make it up to you for foreseeing everything just now?" He lowered his head nervously, twisting the hem of his jacket, his voice barely audible. I didn't mean it. Whatever you say, I'll accept it." I sighed dramatically. A decent girl must protect her reputation. If people hear about this, the gossiping neighbors will say I have no shame. How could I live with that? I bit my lip, struggling to hold back the smile tugging in my mouth. Lucas, honest to the core, turned even redder and couldn't meet my eyes. "Don't listen to anyone. I'll take responsibility for you." Chapter 9. When I was reborn, I had decided to focus only on my career, never again on love. But when fate comes knocking, you cannot stop it. A single glance, a fleeting spark, and something began to grow. Just a few brief encounters during his leaves were enough for me to make a decision. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with Lucas. With his limited means, he always gave me all his food vouchers, making sure I had full bowls of rice and extra dishes. Whenever there was meat, he unhesitatingly gave me his portion, keeping only the vegetables for himself. "Jenny, eat a little more. You're too thin," he said, his eyes filled with a tenderness I had never once seen in Damian's gaze. Lucas came from a poor family. His parents worked endlessly just to survive. Yet with determination and effort, He always managed to stand out in the army evaluations. That day we were walking along a quiet path when Lucas seemed to want to say something but hesitated. "Jenny, soon our unit will be transferred to the south. If that happens, it will be very hard for us to see each other again," so I thought. I froze, thinking he was about to tell me he didn't want to be with me anymore. But to my surprise, he let out a sigh and continued with firm sincerity. "Why don't we get married? You could come with me to the south as my wife, and then we'd never be separated." It felt like a long-awaited wish had finally been granted. I nodded vigorously, overjoyed. Lucas was so happy that very same day he went back to the barracks and submitted the marriage report. By then, gossip about me and Lucas had already spread throughout the neighborhood. When I told my parents I was going to marry Lucas, the army cook, the news fell like a stone into a pond, stirring up chaos at home and in the community. "Are you insane? You had the chance to marry a commander, and you choose a butcher instead?" My mother cried in disbelief and fury. "Mom, Lucas is a soldier too. A commander may have rank, but Damian has never loved me or respected you. Lucas may only be a cook, but he has talent and heart. I believe he will accomplish great things. And, most importantly, truly loves me. With him, I feel at peace." Peace? What do you know about peace? That man cuts with a white knife and comes out with a red knife. Butcher one day, cook the next. What future do you think you'll have with him? How can he compare with Damian? You're throwing your life away. My father paced back and forth, so agitated his pipe struck the ground with each step. The neighbors, of course, soon learned of my decision to marry quickly and without permission. Madame Wang, perched on her stool at the doorway peeling vegetables, scoffed. "Has the Li girl gone crazy? Every woman dreams of marrying the commander, and she abandons him for a butcher." "Exactly. Who knows what kind of spell was cast on her? How will she live now?" added Aunt Wu, shaking her head. Sister-in-law Wang, who had always clashed with my family, leaned in conspiratorially. "Do you know what I heard? That Jenny girl isn't decent at all. They say someone already saw everything. How could the commander want her after that? She's desperate, marrying whoever she can." My parents, enraged, stormed out to confront her, shouting and threatening to tear her tongue out if she dared spread more filth. As a last attempt to change my mind, they locked me in my room. My mother sat outside the door, pleading, "Jenny, listen to your mother. Leave that butcher. We can still talk to the Lu family, there's still time." When Damian learned from his unit that I had broken off our engagement to marry a mere cook, his pride and anger flared. He requested leave again and came to my house, bringing his aide along just to laugh at me. He looked at me with thinly veiled contempt and sneered. "So you're marrying Lucas? What a surprise. I thought you broke up with me to marry some general, not a pig slayer. And I, a regiment commander, how could that man, who only knows how to cut meat and stir pots, be better than me? Or is it that the smell of grease has clouded your judgment?" His voice was loud, arrogant, dripping with sarcasm. "You really do have unique taste, leaving the commander's lady to become the wife of a kitchen hand. What a bright future ahead of you." Despite his venomous ridicule, I stayed calm, my gaze unwavering. I answered in a voice sharp but steady. "Commander Lu, it's clear you think power buys everything. But I don't bow to power. What Lucas gives me is something you could never understand, nor do you have the right to judge him." "But you'll cry about this later," Damian spat, storming out. But I knew him too well. His reaction wasn't about love, it was wounded pride. Not long after, Lucas arrived. Dressed neatly in his uniform, he carried a bag of hand-picked pastries from the market and fresh pork. Nervously, he knocked on my parents' door. Seeing their cold expressions, he swallowed hard but drew in a deep breath and spoke with determination. "Uncle, Auntie, I know you're worried about Jenny and me. It was my mistake not to come sooner to ask for her hand. But I want you to know my intentions are sincere. I want to marry Jenny. Though my rank is low, I have enough to support us, and I will give her all my savings. I may not have the status of a commander, but I have an honest heart. I want to give Jenny a real, stable life. All I ask is a chance." His eyes shone with sincerity and resolve. My parents said nothing, but I could see the ice in their hearts beginning to melt. In silence, I knew they had accepted him. Chapter 10. Soon after, The army approved our marriage application. There was no lavish ceremony, no fine dresses. In the small auditorium of the military unit, our comrades hung simple red paper characters of double happiness. Lucas wore his spotless uniform, and I a modest red dress. We stood side by side before our comrades, exchanging glances filled with hope and determination for the life ahead. And that was how we stepped together onto the path of marriage, supporting each other in the great tide of history, clinging to our love and convictions. We began a new chapter. Shortly after our wedding, Lucas's unit was transferred to the south, and I moved with him to Nanchang. But unlike other soldiers' wives who devoted themselves entirely to running the household, I had no intention of living only as a housewife. I had a dream. In my past life, I had visited Nanchang many times, but by then it was already a top-tier city, famous across the country, and even abroad. Yet more than 40 years ago, Nanchang was nothing more than a small fishing town. Lucas thought I was sacrificing too much by moving there, but I didn't mind because I knew that when the 1980s arrived, this region would become the spearhead of China's economic development. Here, the future would shine brighter than anywhere else. I already had a plan to continue in textiles. Within the family quarters at the barracks, I quickly earned a reputation for being a tough and capable wife. I had already spoken with Lucas about our future. Like me, he didn't want to spend his whole life surrounded by pans and kitchen smoke. Lucas, do you really want to spend your whole life in the army kitchen? You have talent. You should try to enter the military academy and aim higher. At first, Lucas was shy. Jenny, I'm fine in the kitchen. Besides, getting into the academy isn't easy. Of course, it's not easy. But if you don't try, how will you ever know what you're capable of? People with ambition always push themselves further. Or do you want to reek of grease your whole life? Under my constant encouragement, Lucas returned to his books and studied diligently. In the end, his efforts paid off. Was admitted to the military academy. During the years he studied, our daughter was born. The weight of the home and child-rearing fell entirely on my shoulders, but true love gave me strength. I felt resilient, unbreakable. Nothing seemed too difficult or exhausting. The 1980s were a time of immense opportunity and challenge. I could not afford to relax, not even for a single day. In our tiny one-room apartment, while soothing my baby, I was already turning over my business plans in my mind. All I had was an old second-hand sewing machine I had scrimped to buy, but it was my treasure, the starting point of my dream. By day, I carried my daughter on my back and went out searching for cheap fabric suppliers. By night, I sat at the machine cutting and sewing without rest. I studied fashion magazines brought from Hong Kong, adapting those trends into my own textile designs. When technical problems arose, I sought out old tailors for advice. At first, my products could only be sold in the barracks courtyard or at small street stalls. Sales were modest, but I didn't lose heart. I improved my techniques, raised the quality, and little by little, my unique designs and careful workmanship won over customers. Orders began to grow. I rented a small workshop and hired a few workers. The business began to thrive. Around that time, Lucas also graduated successfully from the academy, and it was as though a rocket had been ignited. His career took off with force. With his solid training and relentless dedication, he quickly distinguished himself in the army. From the very base level, he carried out every mission with determination, showing natural leadership. His unit became known for its discipline and efficiency. In both training and real missions, they achieved exemplary results, and step by step, Lucas rose through the ranks. Chapter 11. A few years later, during an army event, I unexpectedly crossed paths with Celestine, the once dazzling, arrogant woman, now reduced to a common figure, nearly forgotten. She threw me a fleeting glance, unable to meet my eyes, then hurried away. It was other soldiers' wives who told me what had happened over the years. Damian, they said, had suffered a leg injury in an accident some years back. He received disability compensation and chose to retire from the army, returning to civilian life. The state assigned him an administrative position, but Celestine, deciding he was no longer worthy of her, asked for a divorce. Not long after, she attached herself to a widowed officer of mid-rank. Preparations for marriage were made quickly. Believing she had secured a powerful backer, she became arrogant and overbearing in the army's arts troupe, offending everyone. But something happened. The wedding was called off, and the officer married another woman instead. From then on, Celestine was marginalized, cast into obscurity, never trusted again. Meanwhile, Damian, in his civilian post, committed a serious mistake through negligence, causing significant financial loss to the state. He was dismissed. Once a prodigy since childhood, Damian never knew how to accept defeat. Blow after blow, he collapsed completely, severing all ties with his former comrades and subordinates. The soldiers' wives who shared the story did so with pity. But me, I felt not the slightest compassion. Everything was the result of their own choices. If anything, I thought fate had been far too merciful with them. Chapter 12. The 21st century arrived. After years of tireless effort and struggle, my textile factory continued to expand. Our products not only sold successfully in the city of Shen but also reached foreign markets. Using the foresight I had gained from my rebirth, I accumulated a fortune worth billions and became a renowned entrepreneur in the textile industry nationwide. Lucas, though already past 60, still stood tall with a steady gaze. With age, he had grown even more distinguished. His uniform, always immaculate, gleamed with the insignia of his rank, reflecting the authority and respect he commanded. And yet, whenever he stood before me, all that authority melted into boundless tenderness. As the years went by, our relationship only grew stronger. We understood each other, supported one another, and shared both the gray days and the sunny ones. With love and respect, we walked together through every season of life. With Lucas by my side, a grown daughter, and an adorable grandchild, I hadn't thought about Damian in decades. Until one day, when we were at the park with our granddaughter in the car, an old man with a limp stepped out from the guard booth, trembling as he held up a sign with a QR code for the parking fee. The moment our eyes met, Damian and I froze. Lucas, of course, had long forgotten that chapter of my youth with Damian. He could never have guessed that this dirty, unkempt, nearly unrecognizable old man had once been the proud, dazzling Commander Lu. With a calm expression, Lucas scanned the code. The parking barrier lifted, and the car rolled slowly forward. Inside, the only sound was our granddaughter's cheerful little voice, chattering endlessly, while Lucas answered her with playful patience in a childish tone. Through the rearview mirror, I caught sight of Damian still standing there, motionless, his gaze locked on our car as we drove away. Damian. This time, for real, we will never see each other again.